All right, well, okay. Good morning, everyone. I want to thank you for joining us this morning. My name is Lynn Giacobbe. I'm the CEO of Kendal at Home. For those of you that maybe we haven't met yet, I'm really excited this morning. This session is as a result of our Philanthropy Committee, which is a committee of the Board of Directors. And we've invited a couple of members of the committee who are also members of Kendal at Home to join us today. So I want to welcome Mary Picken and John Shelley, who are going to be sharing their experiences with us. But a couple of things as we get ready to get started, I want to let you know that you can certainly type in any questions that you might have throughout the presentation by just clicking on the chat box or the Q&A at the bottom. And I'll also allow time at the end for questions, and I'll allow you to just ask your question. I can give you permission to unmute yourself, and you can ask your questions out loud. So if you want to hold those questions until the end, we'll certainly have time for that conversation to take place. And I also want to let you know that if there's something you have clarification or something pertinent to what either Mary or John are talking about, you can type that in, and Sue is on with me, and we'll be fielding those questions, and we'll lean in whenever it's appropriate to ask those. So feel free to add your comments or questions as we go along. But we know that this is a time of year when you're probably, I know in my mailbox are lots of solicitations and people asking for charitable donations. And we thought that this might be a good time to just have a conversation about how to sort through those requests, what's important to you, how do you make those charitable contributions, and what might the impact be. We're not here to give legal advice or legal counsel, although John is an attorney, but we're not here to give you professional counsel today. It's really just a conversation around charitable giving and the ways in which you can do that, how nonprofits might benefit from that charitable giving, and really just to have that conversation. Kendal at Home is certainly a nonprofit, and we will be among those in sending a solicitation in your mailbox. Today's really not about giving to Kendal at Home. It's really just a matter of a conversation about charitable giving in general, and what kind of impact it has had both in Mary and John's life, why they do it, what's important to them, and how they've built a legacy around that. So I'm going to turn it over to Mary, and I'm going to ask both Mary and John to introduce themselves, give you a little bit of background about them. What I can tell you is that they're both phenomenal individuals who we've had the privilege of working with for a very long time. And both of them serve either on the board or on the committee, and are doing incredible work to help support the mission of Kendal at Home. So Mary, as the newest board member and the newest member representative to the board, I'm going to turn it over to you to share a little bit about yourself and talk a little bit about charitable giving in your life.
Well, I've been a member of Kendal at Home for 16 years, and I'm retired. I live in Oberlin, and I am 85 years old. I just had a birthday. And I'm really glad to be able to talk with you today and to share my approach to charity. When I do, I will be describing really 3 elements to my personal strategy. I'm going to try to tell you why I donate, how I donate, and where I donate. Here's the why part. I donate because I want to perpetuate what I call a family tradition of generosity. And I do it by partly involving my adult children and my grandchildren in the choices of what recipients we should choose each year. This tradition started with my in-laws, who were immigrants who had very little education, but were very generous to their church. And they never really had any money. An example is that their first farm, which was in Wakeman, here near Oberlin, was called Rock Acres. So you can imagine how much productive income they got from that. But they always gave 10% to their church. They were very careful to do that. So in addition to wanting to perpetuate this family tradition, I also donate because I want to save money on my taxes. I don't like giving money to the federal, state, or local entities if I can avoid it. And so one of my goals is to reduce my adjusted gross income, which is where taxes are determined. I want to reduce it as much as possible. In support of that, I want to tell you how in our family we tried to carry out this 10%. I always filed our taxes, but before John would sign the joint return, John always asked me to point out on the tax return where we had, in fact, charitable donations that were at least 10% of our income. Only then would he sign the return. So how do I donate? I have the good fortune to have two funds with Fidelity. They are donor-directed funds. And what's good about using those is that I can make a donation. I will probably in mid-December, and I get the benefit of the charitable deduction for those amounts now. I can then later, anytime I want to, direct money to various charities. And I like the convenience of that because it's so easy to manage. And of course, at the end of the calendar year, I'm estimating what my tax liability is going to be for that calendar year. And so it's a nice way to get a sort of an instant deduction. The other thing I do is that most of my assets are with Vanguard in IRAs. And what I do there is that I am able to take a QCD, a qualified charitable deduction. And I plan for that by conversations with my Vanguard advisor. In fact, I had a conversation just this week with him, and we plotted out how much money I was available to use for these qualified charitable deductions. And the way that works, I will tell him, I have to within 2 weeks, tell him what checks I need for the various charity for this year. And then Vanguard will send me the checks, and then I and my children and grandchildren actually deliver the checks to the various charities. And I think that's very helpful in my goal. I want my children and grandchildren to become well accustomed to charitable donations. And I figured by making them do some of the work, they're reminded. Where? Well, one thing I have done, John had an insurance policy which was already committed to go, the funds were to go to Oberlin College. He bought that ages ago. One of his classmates was selling insurance. But when he died and the money became available, Oberlin Development actually called me and asked me where I wanted the money to go. And so those insurance proceeds went to the Oberlin Conservatory of Music School, because I know John loved music and shared my belief that early childhood education is going to save the world someday. So that's what I did. I presently now I I reminded my daughter-in-law that I needed to get names of charities, and she's answered, but my son hasn't yet. But I'm going to give you the list of where we sent money last year. To the public library, to my church for their community meals program, to a theater restoration project. I'm terribly proud. My daughter-in-law has established a childhood center in their hometown, and she's overcome lots of obstacles, but it's opening this week, and we are giving them some money. To a food bank, for medical research. And as you might imagine, when my grandchildren make suggestions, some of them are quite charming, and I fulfill them. And of course, these children get the checks to deliver to these entities. One's a cat rescue program. One is a circus program for rehabilitating juvenile delinquents, an environmental source. I really enjoy their choices. And another prior one, John and I were really excited about what was a new project at the time for Kendal at Home. That was when Le Chat was being established. And we knew that it was going to be expensive because that was when things absolutely had to be printed and mailed. So there were costs to that. And so John and I gave them funds from our resources. And that's my story. I do believe I have perpetuated the tradition of generosity, and I have saved a lot of money on taxes. There you go.
Mary, thank you so much. And I said that John was an attorney. You are also an attorney and had worked many years as a patent attorney, if I'm not mistaken, right?
That's right. And I went to law school late in life. I started law school when I was 40. So there you go. I had a happy career as a chemical patent attorney for Ashland Chemical, but now I'm fully retired.
And busier than ever.
Yes.
Well, thank you, Mary. Thanks so much. John, I want to turn it over to you and have you share a little bit about your experience.
Okay, I'm John Shelley. I guess we're laying our age cards on the table. So I just had my 79th birthday, and I don't know how long I've been a Kendal at Home member. It's been a long time, but without a little research, I couldn't tell you precisely. I often jokingly refer to myself as a recovering lawyer. I still do a little law practice and still put my technical knowledge to use for a number of nonprofit organizations from time to time. And so I keep my law license in effect and probably will for a fair number of additional years. I spent most of my working life as a practicing attorney at one of the gigantic law firms in downtown Cleveland. It was a large law firm when I started, and today it's got something like 1,800 lawyers across the world. And I did trust and estates work. More or less by accident, certainly had nothing to do with me as a business developer. About 10 years before I left the firm, I got a call from Ashland University, and they said, we think we need a lawyer to help our fundraising people. And we're not sure that that's right, and we're not sure we can afford you, but would you be willing to try it for 6 months? And I said, sure. And we did it. And it was, I had fun. They had fun. They thought it was useful. And then about 6 months after that, I got a call from some people at the Cleveland Clinic, which was almost verbatim the same thing. We think we need some legal help. We're not sure. We're not 100% sure of that. In any event, it wound up by the time I left my firm, it was probably 25% of my law practice. I got to a point where I had as much a big professional firm life as I could stand and wanted to do something a little bit more pro bono. And so I went to work at Case Western Reserve University in their fundraising area. I never had to ask anybody for money. What I did was basically provide technical help and tax help both to the real fundraisers and also to people who were about to donate significant amounts of money to Case. I was going to stay for 5 years. I wound up staying for 11 and retired from that just in time for COVID to hit. And there we are. How did I become somebody who is fascinated by this whole charitable giving business? And it's really made a difference in my personal life. Thinking about this, I don't recall much discussion about giving when I was a kid growing up. When I went to college, though, one of the things that almost immediately grabbed my attention was that if I got a book out of the university library, it invariably had inside the front cover a book plate. And the book plate almost always said, purchased from the fund established by Henry P. something or other, member of the class of 1842 or something like that. So somebody who had graduated from this place more than a century before I did, and at some point in time given the university some money, and 100 and so years later, they were still using that money to buy books for kids like me. And I really thought that was wonderful. It gave me my first real sense of the importance that most people place on leaving a legacy behind, something that's going to be there benefiting the world after they are gone. I was also inspired by my late wife, Patricia, who, like Mary, went to law school very late, even later in Pat's case. She was 50 years old when she started at the law school at Case Western Reserve. When she got out, she went to work for a different large law firm in downtown Cleveland. And she did a very interesting thing as a result of that. She gave away to charity. I'm not making this up. She gave away to charity every dollar that she earned during the 6 or 7 years that she worked at that firm. Everything above and beyond the Social Security tax and withholding tax that she paid. And that's very unusual, but it was something that was extremely important to her. She also said, well, my husband's got a pretty good job, and so we're not relying on my income, so I may as well have some fun with it. Her focus, which I continue to honor, was very, very much to help people in American society who need help the most. And so she did a great deal of support for various anti-poverty efforts, transitional housing arrangements, Cleveland Food Bank, and a variety of others. And I have an interest in those areas myself, but to be perfectly honest, I probably would not be as generous to those things today as I actually am if it were not for Patricia's really remarkable example. Third thing I would mention is when I worked for that time at Case Western Reserve, I really had the opportunity to kind of look under the hood at the economics of a large nonprofit organization. And I have to tell you, it's a little scary to look under the hood, okay? These numbers are very approximate, but in a typical year these days, Case Western Reserve has about $1 billion worth of income. And they have something like $999,999,000 worth of expenses. So they are in the black by the narrowest of margins. And that's very, very typical of nonprofit organizations of every sort. And the only reason these places are able to stay in black is because people give them on a voluntary basis charitable contributions. And I certainly know a case, and I think they're very typical in that regard. If people stopped giving money to them, they'd be in significant trouble, even though they get, in Case's case, a great deal of revenue from tuition and from research grants from federal government and others. And even more so, if you look at arts organizations, the amount of money that they get in terms of memberships and ticket sales and that sort of stuff is, it's often less than half of their expenses in a particular year. So even organizations that on a day in and day out basis, such as a university, such as a hospital system, and such as almost everybody, they're really dependent on annual gifts and legacy gifts that people use to add to the endowment of these organizations. In any event, what do I support? I have not done much serious thinking about this, I have to confess. So this is utterly unexamined, and it's all has to do with the heart rather than the brain. But in my case, the organizations that I tend to support on an annual basis are arts and culture, Cleveland Orchestra, Art Museum, a variety of other things. As I said, those charities that my late wife Patricia supported, education, in particular higher education, and even more particularly the university where I went to both college and law school. And I should mention, I do make a very modest gift to Kendal at Home every year, just because I think they need it, and I feel that obligation as well. So how do I do this mechanically? This is what I spent 11 years, or actually 11 years plus, helping my clients at my law firm in helping fundraising people and would-be donors at Case. How to do this in the way that is most effective, taking into account, number one, the goals and priorities and the mix of assets that donors have, and also, very importantly, to get people the tax benefits that they are entitled in the best possible world for a gift, particularly gifts that are of any significant degree of magnitude. So what do I do personally? Okay, I should preface this by saying I long ago met that magic age where I am required to take annual distributions of increasing amounts out of my IRA, 401k plan, and so on and so forth. And that amount, and 90% of my net worth is in those kinds of retirement vehicles. And so as a result, what I do as a practical matter is I make cash gifts, by and large, cash gifts of I write a check payable to Case Western Reserve University. I really do that only for pretty small gifts, things that are $250 or less, okay? For amounts larger than that, if I'm making kind of a regular, the annual fund kind of gift to my law school, for example, what I do with those, I use the things that Mary has mentioned, the things usually often referred to as IRA charitable rollovers, or QCD. QCD stands for Qualified Charitable Distribution. That's the term that the Internal Revenue Code
Thank you.
uses. But what you do is that you take money that you would otherwise be required to take into your own personal income, and instead you contribute a part of it to a charity. It basically has to be what they call a public charity, which is almost everything. And there are a bunch of other little nitty-gritty rules, the most important of which is you can't do this with more than $100,000 per year. So there is that cap, which is vastly more than most people use. But I had people that I dealt with when I was at Case who would every year have their IRA write a check to Case Western Reserve for $100,000. They didn't need that money, and that counts for purposes of those required distribution rules. It counts as though it had been paid for you, but you don't pay the income tax on it. Okay. One of the things I should mention is some organizations, and Mary Vancard is one of them, they will do what Mary has described. They'll give you a check payable to a charity, but they will also, if you're a little brave, they will give you a checkbook. So you can write the check yourself. You do have to make sure, and I have to be honest, I have not always remembered this. You have to make sure that Vanguard or whoever it is has cash ready there to be paid out when you write that check. But that's kind of the ultimate inconvenience. There are many, many, many advantages for those of us who are 70 and a half or older to doing this technique. One that Mary didn't mention, but it is kind of important, is it provides Ohio income tax benefits as well, because by doing that, you reduce your adjusted gross income. And the amount of the way the Ohio income tax system works is the first thing you look at is the dollar amount of your adjusted gross income for federal income tax purposes. So doing these IRA rollovers, QCDs, reduces not only your federal income tax, but your Ohio income tax as well. I also have, just worth mentioning, I set up many years ago a donor advised fund. When Mary was talking about her arrangement at Fidelity, technically speaking, that's called a donor advised fund. And as she said, you put money in year one if you want to, and you can let it sit there under current law. You can let it sit there for the next 30 years. Without any legal obligation or any penalty from the tax people before you actually distribute it out. I set up one of those originally for some reason or another. I rarely use it these days as a vehicle for making lifetime gifts to charity. What I do, and I really love this, is Patricia and I decided many years ago that how we were going to divide up our estates when the last of us passed away. And we decided a certain share of that would go to charity. So the way my estate plan works is the money that I want to go to charity actually is paid upon my death to my donor advised fund at the Cleveland Foundation. And then I have a agreement with the Cleveland Foundation that says, when you get this money after I'm dead and gone, here's where it should go. And some of it stays in the Cleveland Foundation, but some of it goes to my college, some of it goes to my church, some of it goes to various and sundry other people. One of the things I love about that is, the principal thing I love about it is that all of that money, nobody pays any income tax on it ever. And the second thing I love is if one of my beloved smaller charities goes out of business, and this happens from time to time, I call up the people of the Cleveland Foundation and say, we have to rewrite that little document to take them out and increase the amount of money going to somebody else or add a new beneficiary and so on. The other thing I've done is I've set up a couple of things called charitable gift annuities. And a charitable gift annuity is, in a way, simplicity itself. What you do is you go to your favorite charity and you say, here's fill in the blanks, $20,000. What I want you to do is to pay me an income on that amount of money for the rest of my life, or my life and my wife's lifetime. And when I am gone, or both I and my spouse are gone, at that point in time, whatever amount of money you've got left from that fund goes to you, the charity, for whatever purposes we have agreed on. These things are very popular, and I guess you get an income tax deduction. A portion of the income that comes back to you is tax exempt for both federal and Ohio and municipal income tax purposes. They're simple to administer. The payout rates these days are quite high, for at least for those people who are my age and older. And so they're nifty, and they're easy to set up. They're particularly attractive at the present time. And one of the things our philanthropy committee is going to be doing at some point in time is seeing if we can gather up some information that we could have very general advice about these sorts of things. Having said that, let me direct you to a couple of things that are right there right now that I think are remarkably useful and easy to access. One of them is this, see if we get it there. The first of two IRS publications. This is IRS publication 17, I think it is. And it's called Your Federal Income Tax, okay? And it's about, geez, I don't know, close to 200 pages long. And it talks in considerable detail about pretty much every aspect of your federal income tax. It gets updated every year, sometime early in the spring, to reflect law changes. And you can find it quickly on the IRS website, which is irs.gov, G-O-V. And a useful thing, really, a real, they've done a, whoever has put that thing together has done a terrific job of explaining some occasionally complex topics, and something pretty close to plain English. The other thing, a little bit more specifically focused on charitable giving, is this thing, publication 526, which is called Charitable Contributions. And it is also updated every spring to reflect any changes in the law, but that gets into a whole bunch of important stuff. Not every gift to every organization that you think is a charity is a gift that is entitled to a deduction under the tax rules. The great majority are, but there are some that are not. What contributions, I'm just reading from the table of contents, contributions you can deduct, contributions you can't deduct. Contributions of property, that is rules for giving away things other than cash. So you give your car to Idea Stream, okay, or you give your house to somebody, or you give 1,000 shares of stock in something. All of those things, there are some special rules on how you calculate and how you have to verify the value of gifts of that sort. There are some limits on deductions. 99% of the people in the United States of America don't have to worry about those limitations because they're pretty high, but there are limits, and so on and so on and so forth. A terrific publication, okay? A couple of other things that I would mention are worth doing. Mary was talking about her thing at Fidelity, the Fidelity website, where they talk about, I think they call it, isn't that what they call it, the Fidelity Gift Fund, Mary? Is that what they call it, or something akin to that?
When I Google it, it's Charitable Gift Fidelity that gets you where you want to go.
Okay. But their website is really first rate in talking about those things, the donor advised funds. Another thing, if you're looking at other stuff, the things like the gift annuities that I mentioned, I should mention also many years ago now, I set up a charitable remainder trust. It's another vehicle that pays me an income for as long as I live, and then the principal goes to my university at the time of my death. If you take a look at the website of almost any large university, you will usually find a lot of information about gifting through those kinds of vehicles. Sometimes it is under a category that they call planned giving. But if you start out, believe me, on the first page of every university's website of any size, there is something that says something like how to give. And if you click on that and drill down a little bit, you will find some useful information. And one of the things that's particularly useful if you are doing one of the complicated things is that they've got some calculators. So you could say, I'm going to acquire one of these gift annuities for $20,000. And then it will tell you how big your income tax deduction will be. It won't be $20,000 incidentally, because you're getting an income stream back. But that's really nice and very useful. As I say, I mentioned the most large universities have got something like that. Another one that I would mention because it's local and because it is particularly robust is the website of the Jewish Federation of Cleveland, which is really, really exemplary in terms of the degree of detail. It's quite user-friendly. You don't have to be Jewish to use it. And for that matter, if you want to call up one of their people and talk to them on their phone, they are wonderful resources. And if you have to admit, as I do, that I'm an Episcopalian, they'll still talk to you and provide you a lot of help. And that's very characteristic, I would say, of people who raise money for colleges, universities, private foundations, and so on. They are people who feel that they're in the business of helping, making the world a better place, not just their own organization. So they tend to be very good resources. So those are kind of my thoughts for whatever they are worth. And it says here on my little notes to myself, questions and answers, question mark. So I think both of us are available if anybody has it.
Thank you, John. And thank you, Mary. I appreciate it. There we go. So I'm going to open it up for questions. And if anyone has a question, you can actually type it in. You can raise your hand. There's a little hand at the bottom of the screen in your toolbar. If you raise your hand, I can unmute you or give you permission to unmute yourself, actually, and you can ask the question out loud. I thought I might put Frank Martinez on the spot. Frank chairs our philanthropy committee of the board, and I know he's joined us in the audience. Frank, is there anything, I'm going to allow you to talk, but I wondered if you might want to add anything.
One suggestion, as John and Mary said, I've used these opportunities. However, some of the smaller charities that I've sent to didn't cash the check right away. So I found that I have to do this early in late September or early October, simply because I want the check to be cashed before the end of the year, so that it affects my
Your tax deduction.
my tax deduction. The other thing is I'm finding that given with the change in the tax rules now, you have to be careful that your giving is sufficient so that you can make a tax deduction on your income tax. So it's something that needs to be looked at carefully. I'm not saying don't give money away. All I'm saying is recognize that given the new tax laws, depending on your income, you need to look at how much you're giving away and make sure it's sufficient so that you can get that tax deduction.
Yeah, that's those are both good points.
That's a good
When I send out a check to a charity anytime after Thanksgiving, I put a sticky or a cover letter that says in boldface type, please cash this before the end of the year. I think that's a good idea. And Frank, you're exactly right. For some people, you do need to take a look at how the charitable deduction is going to integrate with your other deductions and so on and so forth. The problem disappears if you give a whole lot of money, but it's not all of us give a whole lot of money. But some thoughtfulness is quite appropriate.
Mary.
One thing I ran into with the Fidelity funds is that one can only direct money to a 501c3. And a few times I ran into giving to local churches here in Oberlin, and it turned out that they were not 501c3s. And Fidelity is really a great help with that. They will actually call the charity and inquire. And I think they also help them how to figure out how to become a 501c3.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a good thing. I wanted to say something else about the Fidelity donor funds. The reason I have two is that on one of them, my younger son is the successor trustee, and on the other son is. And that's another way I'm trying to perpetuate this charitable attitude. And they know about that too. And actually I try to keep them balanced. So on the Fidelity website, I can see how much is left in Andrew's fund and Harold's. And I always try to keep things even between my sons. And I really recommend Fidelity. They're great.
Yeah, I should have they're very, very good at that. We should mention, though, we've mentioned Fidelity quite a bit. All of the big mutual fund companies these days have that kind of vehicle. Vanguard certainly does. I know Charles Schwab does. I assume almost everybody else of the big boys in the mutual fund business do.
Thank you. Frank, anything else you'd like to add?
I want to underscore what John and Mary both said. We all, at least I'm in that feeling that I need to share, and I think giving it the biggest thing my wife and I have to do is figure out where we're sending our money. Make a gift that's significant enough to a treasury recipient recognizes that it was a gift. Instead just sending $5 is not it. It's $100 or more that you really, you got to give something in significance for the charity.
Right. And the charity needs to cash the check when they receive it, right? So you can get credits. That's probably
one of the things you do. One of the things you do discover is that there are a lot of places, particularly colleges and universities, that basically shut down from sometime in mid-December until the first week in January at best.
Yeah. That's a good point.
Yeah.
It's something to think about if you are making that charitable contribution to higher ed in a place that might not have staff there during those weeks. Really important. How about questions from the audience? Anyone have questions or comments? Anything that we can answer for you? Anything you'd like to share with the group today?
Another thing I like to mention, and as John mentioned, some people say, well, we're part of it's a nonprofit agency. The margins are so narrow. We really need to be generous with these nonprofit agencies. They don't just have money to give away or to operate. They are working on very small margins. So you are really giving significant opportunities to those agencies when you send them money that they weren't expecting.
That's a good point. Mhm.
Yeah, and you know, I think that one thing that's been discussed here is, you know, determining whether or not an organization is a 501c3 charity is really important as well. It's important for you to know that Kendal at Home is a 501c3 charity. There's a process that an organization goes through to establish themselves as a nonprofit organization, and needs to abide by. And part of that is around the community benefit that we provide. So our services go beyond even just providing services to members who've joined the program, but also providing community benefit services and through programming, like things that we do, such as Dementia Friends, the Stepping On programs, things of that nature, even a lot of our education programs that are open to the general public, a lot of the commitments that we make to work in the aging services field are all really dedicated to that community benefit and expanding the mission of Kendal at Home. One of the things that we're looking at right now in terms of the expansion of that benefit is to look at diversifying this product line to be able to serve a population of individuals that John referenced who are either underserved or unserved at all. And we're working on a potential partnership with a large healthcare system to be able to work closely with managed care organizations that might allow us to be able to provide some of the benefits that we can provide to members of the program through our partnerships with a different payer source. So Medicare Advantage, for example, supporting some of the services that so many of our members benefit from. I mean, we look at the outcomes of a program like this, enabling members to remain in their homes for the remainder of their life or in the place they want to be. And that's really where most everyone wants to be. So how can we really enhance that mission and expand it to serve others is something that we're always looking at, ways in which we can do that. So I think it is important, excuse me, as you think about those dollars and how they can be used and where you're contributing so that you know the impact will be significant. And just like there are scams around so many things. I get daily notices about scams that are really targeting people who are making charitable contributions. So it's really important, I think, to do your due diligence. And as Mary referenced, know the organizations that you want to support and be able to know that your dollars are really being used in the way that you would have hoped. So many, people get, I know my dad gets tons of swag in the mail, right? And
Yes.
blankets and bags and things like that. And he thinks that, in ways he's contributing those dollars. We've really learned to research the organizations that he certainly wants to support, organizations that are supporting military families, for example. And often the people that are sending that swag in the mail are not really contributing the dollars in the areas that's important to him. So it's really doing that research to know that your dollars are going and contributing to in ways that are really important for you. So I think those are important things to consider as well. John, I never knew that about Pat. Contributing 100% of her earnings. That's pretty incredible.
It was, that was who she was, the kind of person she was. And,
That's pretty amazing.
amazing. Yeah, that's the perfect word.
Yeah, absolutely. What a legacy, though, to be able to leave.
Oh, yeah.
Pretty
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you both so much. Before we close, I just want to ask one more time if anyone else has any questions or comments they want to make. Okay. Well, thank you, Mary, John. Thank you so much for sharing your personal stories with us and ways in which you continue to make a difference in our community. So much appreciated. And I know we appreciate all the time you contribute to Kendal at Home as well as your financial contributions. But most importantly, your time with us is so valued and we appreciate it. So thank you. And thanks to everyone for joining us today. We'll be sending a follow-up email and Sue will include the links to the websites that John referenced so that you'll have access to those as well. But please follow up if you have any questions. We'd be happy to connect with you afterwards. Have a great weekend, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
You too. Thanks.